A mom headed out to shop and never came back. 14 years on, her family learns the jaw-dropping truth behind her disappearance. Soft evening light slipped through the half-closed blinds of the Wilson family's living room, stretching long shadows over the gleaming hardwood floor. John Wilson, now 50, eased himself in his wheelchair, a faint grimace crossing his face as he shifted his weight. It had been 14 years since a sudden stroke sent him tumbling down the stairs, shattering his hip and tethering him to the chair. Though the years had rolled by, his physical limitations stood as a constant echo of how drastically his life had transformed. "Hey, Dad, want a blanket?" Emma called from the kitchen, already tugging one from the hallway closet before he could reply. At 19, she was the only one of his kids still at home, taking on his daily care with a poise that belied her youth. "I'm okay, sweetie," John answered, his voice tinged with a deep weariness that had settled into his character. "When's Ryan supposed to show up?" Jake, John's second oldest at 25, glanced at his phone. He said around 6, so he'll probably pull in soon. Jake had inherited his dad's solid build, broad shoulders, and a matching dimpled chin, but his personality was calmer, more grounded. He worked downtown as an accountant, having pieced together scholarships and part-time gigs to get through college after their mom vanished. "Lucas, can you turn that down a bit?" Olivia called from the dining room where she was setting the table. At 23, she'd matured into a dependable young woman, running a cozy local bookstore. Her dark hair, tied back in a neat ponytail, swung slightly as she moved briskly between the kitchen and dining area. 15-year-old Lucas, lounging on the couch with the remote, grudgingly lowered the volume on the sports highlights. "I'm just hunting for a movie for tonight," he said, flipping through streaming options. "How about that new sci-fi one? You know, with the aliens that blend in with people." "No aliens," John said, cracking a small grin. "You know Emma's not a fan." Emma emerged from the kitchen, balancing a stack of plates. "I'm fine with aliens," she said. "Just not the kind that burst out of bodies while we're trying to enjoy dessert." Their light-hearted teasing filled the house with a cozy glow, proof of how they'd pushed forward as a family despite the pain. Every weekend, all 5 siblings came together like this for dinner, chats, and a movie, a tradition that kept their bonds tight through years of loss. "Tables all set," Olivia declared, stepping back to admire her work. 5 place settings, plus a 6th at the head for Ryan. Each plate was perfectly positioned, glasses sparkled with ice water, and napkins were folded neatly beside forks and knives, a setup their mother had taught her to perfect. "Smells incredible in here," Jake said, strolling toward the dining room. "Lasagna's the star tonight," Emma boasted. "And I whipped up some garlic bread to go with it." Lucas ditched his movie hunt and slid into his usual chair at the table, his lanky frame folding awkwardly. "Can we dig in? I'm starving." John rolled his wheelchair to his place, shaking his head. "We hold off until Ryan's here. That's the rule." "But the food's cooling off," Lucas grumbled, eyeing the steaming dish in the center. "I'll give him a call," Jake offered, already dialing Ryan's number. After a pause, he frowned. "Straight to voicemail." They sat quietly, minutes dragging on. The lasagna stopped steaming. Ice melted in their glasses, diluting the water. John glanced at his watch repeatedly, worry etching deeper lines into his forehead. Just as Olivia was about to suggest they eat without Ryan, the sound of a car crunching into the driveway broke the silence, followed by a door slamming shut. The front door flew open and Ryan burst in, his 30-year-old face flushed with a mix of excitement and worry. Usually polished, he looked rumpled, tie askew, top button undone, dark hair falling over his brow. He scanned the dining room, taking in his family gathered around the table, waiting for him. "Sorry I'm running late," he said, catching his breath. But the urgency in his tone, a tight, electric edge, put everyone on edge. "It's all good, we were just about to," John started, but Ryan cut him off. "I found something," he said abruptly, pulling out his chair but staying on his feet. "About Mom." The room's mood shifted in an instant, like a cold draft sweeping through. Faces tightened, shoulders stiffened. "Got a call from Detective Carter today," Ryan went on, fumbling with his phone. "They uncovered something. I've got to show you guys. Ryan, take a seat, John said firmly. We've been waiting. Dinner's getting cold. Dad, you don't get it, this is huge, Ryan insisted, still standing, gripping his phone like it was his only anchor. Just let me explain for a second. Dad's got a point, Jake chimed in, his voice steady but firm. Let's eat first. Whatever it is can hold until we're done. Ryan scanned the table, searching for someone to back him up, but found no takers. Olivia stared at her plate. Emma chewed her lip anxiously. Lucas shot him a look mixed with irritation and unease. We agreed on this, Olivia said softly. No more mom talk during family time. But this isn't the same, Ryan pushed. The cops found something big, eh? Jake's voice sharpened. We know what went down. She walked out. Couldn't handle it, Dad's accident, the bills piling up, 5 kids to raise alone. She found someone else and bailed. That's not true, Ryan fired back. Mom wouldn't just. But she did, didn't she? Olivia cut in, her calm cracking. Dad's stuck in a wheelchair, we're buried in medical debt, and poof, she's gone without a trace. What else explains that? It's been 14 years, Ryan, Jake added, his tone softening a touch. No calls, no letters, nothing. What more proof do you want? The argument heated up, voices piling on as buried pain and bitterness spilled out. Lucas sank lower in his seat while Emma's eyes darted helplessly between her siblings. Stop it! John's voice boomed, followed by a harsh cough that doubled him over in his chair. The shouting halted instantly. Emma sprang up, gently patting her dad's back and offering him water as his coughing eased. I'm sorry, Dad, she whispered, then turned to her siblings. Please, can we not do this? Dad's been looking forward to tonight all week. He misses us. Can't we have one calm dinner? A heavy quiet blanketed the table, broken only by John's ragged breaths as he steadied himself. Fine, Ryan said at last, dropping into his chair, his jaw clenched with frustration. But you all need to hear this isn't some random lead. The police found Mom's car submerged in a river. Despite their resolve to brush him off, the news snapped everyone's attention to him. What? John's voice was barely a whisper. Detective Carter called me this afternoon, Ryan said, seizing the moment. They found her car in a river. That's why I was late, I was getting the details from him. John turned to Emma. Can you grab my phone from the side table, honey? She hurried to fetch it, watching as her dad scrolled through notifications with shaky hands, his face drained of color. For missed calls from Detective Carter, he confirmed, meeting Ryan's eyes. Did they find her body? Ryan shook his head. Not sure yet. The detective said they're still working the scene. He thinks it'd help if we could head down there. The family exchanged wary glances, their meal forgotten as the weight of this bombshell settled over them. Let's eat something first, Emma suggested, cutting through the stunned hush. Her practical side kicked in as she glanced at her dad with concern. Dad's meds need to be taken with food, and it won't take long. Jake nodded. She's got a point. Let's scarf this down quick, then we'll go. They ate in strained silence, the lasagna now bland on their tongues. Forks clinked against plates as they rushed through, their minds tangled with unspoken questions. Once they'd eaten enough to move on, Jake and Lucas started clearing the table while Olivia and Emma helped John get ready for the unexpected trip. Emma grabbed his meds and a blanket while Olivia gathered his wallet and phone. You sure you're up for this? Dad? Emma asked gently, adjusting his sweater. We could stay back while the others check it out. John shook his head firmly. I have to be there. Outside, the evening had turned cooler, a crisp edge in the air that wasn't there earlier. Their trusty old SUV, fitted for John's wheelchair, waited in the driveway of their humble home, a single-story ranch on the town's edge, framed by towering oaks that had seen their family's highs and lows for decades. Ryan and Jake carefully lifted their dad from his wheelchair into the passenger seat, folding the chair and stowing it in the back. Olivia, Emma, and Lucas piled into the middle row while Ryan slid behind the wheel. I'll drive, he said, tweaking the mirrors. I know right where we're headed. As he backed out, Ryan couldn't help but notice the house's warm glow, porch light casting a soft beam, windows spilling golden light onto the lawn. It looked like any cozy family home on a quiet night, hiding the storm of emotions swirling inside and the aching void that had defined them for 14 years. The SUV cruised through familiar small-town streets, passing the high school where all 5 kids had studied and the grocery store where their mom had supposedly gone the day she vanished. Ryan's hands tightened on the wheel, fighting to keep a steady speed despite the adrenaline pumping through him. "What did Detective Carter say, exactly?" John asked, breaking the heavy quiet in the car. Ryan kept his eyes fixed on the road. "Not a lot, just that they found Mom's car in a river during another investigation." He didn't share much over the phone. "After all these years," Olivia murmured from the back. "Why now?" No one had a reply. Ryan's phone pinged with a new message. "That's the detective," he said, glancing at it briefly. "He's sending the exact spot. It's Miller's Lake." "That's a good 30 minutes out," Jake pointed out. "What was Mom's car doing way out there?" The unspoken question lingered. Miller's Lake was isolated, tucked away, a place you'd go if you didn't want anyone to find you. The rest of the trip unfolded in tense quiet, each Wilson family member wrapped in their own swirling thoughts. As the small town faded behind them, streetlights grew sparse and the road tightened into a narrow strip. Ryan switched on the high beams as they veered onto a bumpy dirt path snaking through thick forest toward Miller's Lake. The SUV rattled over the rough ground, forcing Ryan to ease off the gas to navigate the pitted trail. After a few minutes, the trees opened up, revealing the shimmering dark waters of Miller's Lake, glinting under the flashing red and blue lights of police cars lined along the shore. Ryan pulled the SUV as close as he could to the scene, glancing at his dad. "You good to go?" John nodded, his expression hardened with resolve. Jake and Olivia carefully helped him from the car into his wheelchair while Emma rested a steadying hand on his shoulder. The moment they opened the doors, a heavy stench hit them, stagnant water, thick mud, and a faint, unsettling odor hinting at something long buried in the depths now stirred up. Lucas scrunched his face, lingering a step behind as his older siblings guided their dad's wheelchair toward the police tape. The soggy ground made the chair's wheels stick, and Jake and Olivia teamed up to maneuver John over the uneven terrain, occasionally fighting patches of soft muck that threatened to bog them down. Emma stayed glued to her dad's side, her arm looped through his as they neared the cluster of officers. Ryan strode ahead, his eyes sweeping the group for a familiar face. He spotted Detective Carter by the water's edge, locked in discussion with a uniformed cop. The detective, a burly man in his 50s with gray-flecked hair, wore the worn-out expression of someone who'd seen far too much over his long career. "Detective Carter," Ryan called, closing the gap with brisk steps. The detective turned, a spark of recognition crossing his rugged face. "Ryan, you got here." His gaze shifted past Ryan to the rest of the family trudging through the muddy shore. "Looks like you brought the whole crew." "We had to come," Ryan said plainly. "What did you find?" Detective Carter pointed toward the lake where a tow truck stood, its heavy winch already done with its task. On the bank, dripping with murky water and tangled in silt and weeds, sat a battered car, or what was left of it. Even after years submerged, the faded blue sedan was unmistakably their mother's, once driven by Laura Wilson. "We pulled it up this afternoon," Detective Carter said as the family gathered around. "Truth is, we weren't even looking for it. A chopper was scanning the area for a drug trafficking case, and the pilot caught a glint in the water from up high." John stared at the sodden wreck, his face a mask of unreadable emotion. "Did you find?" His voice trailed off, unable to finish. "No bodies," Detective Carter replied, catching the unspoken question. "That's the odd part. The car was completely empty when we hauled it out." "Empty?" Jake echoed, his tone laced with surprise. "You're certain?" "Totally empty," the detective confirmed. "But we did come across some intriguing stuff inside." "What kind of stuff?" Ryan asked, leaning in eagerly. Detective Carter reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed evidence bag holding a waterlogged photo. This was tucked in the glove box, sealed in plastic, which kept it somewhat intact. It's a picture of your mom. John's trembling hands reached for the bag, his eyes fixed on the faded image of Laura, her carefree smile frozen in a moment before she vanished. There's more, the detective added, his voice cautious. We found items tied to a man's sunglasses, a baseball cap, and a receipt with a guy's name on it. I knew it, Olivia snapped, her voice sharp with bitterness. She ran off with someone. That's not fair, Ryan countered swiftly. We don't know that for sure. What else could it mean? Jake pressed. Mom's car at the bottom of a lake, a man's stuff inside, and no trace of her? Seems like she faked her own disappearance. Our findings suggest the car was sunk on purpose, Detective Carter added. No crash damage. The windows were down, letting it fill with water and go under. No signs of a struggle or foul play. She knew abandoning her kids was against the law, Olivia said, folding her arms tightly. She couldn't just walk away without repercussions, so she staged it to look like something happened to her. That's ridiculous, Ryan shot back. Mom wouldn't ditch us. There's got to be another explanation. Lucas, quiet until now, piped up. Why would she leave when Dad needed her most? When we all did. Sometimes people just crack, Jake said softly. The stress gets overwhelming, Dad's medical bills, raising 5 kids alone, no support. She found an escape and took it. Ryan turned to Detective Carter, his voice urgent. You don't buy that, do you? After all this time, there's got to be more to it. The detective let out a heavy sigh. I've been at this for 27 years, Ryan. I've seen people vanish on purpose, going to great lengths to erase their tracks. But why find the car now? John asked, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. After 14 years? As I said, it wasn't on purpose, Detective Carter explained. We were doing aerial sweeps for a drug bust around here. The chopper caught the car's reflection in the water. Sometimes you can spot things like that from above when the light's just right. Pure chance. He produced another evidence bag with a small, water-damaged item. This is how we knew it was your mom's. Her driver's license was in the center console along with this family photo. John took the bag, gazing at the worn but recognizable portrait of himself, Laura, and their 5 kids snapped just months before her disappearance and his stroke. So what's next? Jake asked, his practical side kicking in. Detective Carter rubbed his neck. We'll process the car thoroughly, looking for more clues, but I'll be straight with you, this case is 14 years old. We don't have the manpower for a full-blown investigation unless we find clear evidence of a crime. That's it? Ryan demanded. You're just gonna assume she took off and drop it? I'm not saying that, the detective said patiently. But the evidence leans one way. No signs of a fight, no body, a car sunk deliberately, and a man's belongings inside. It backs the idea that she left by choice. I can give you copies of everything we've collected if you want, he offered, glancing around at the family. Photos, item lists, our initial report. What's the use? Olivia said, her voice flat and defeated. It won't change a thing. John, who'd been mostly silent, spoke up. Emma, I'd like to head home now. I'm worn out. Sure, Dad, Emma said gently, stepping behind his wheelchair. Do what you need with the car, John told Detective Carter. We've lived with this question for 14 years. I'm not sure the truth would bring us peace now. The family started to turn back, but Ryan stayed planted. I want those copies, he said firmly. Detective Carter nodded, retrieving a manila envelope from his vehicle. I had them ready just in case. There's also a smaller envelope with copies of items from the glove box. My team photographed it all when we first pulled the car. He handed the envelope to Ryan, resting a kind hand on his shoulder. I've handled countless missing persons cases, Ryan. It's often the eldest who struggles most to let go. I hope these bring you some closure, son. Ryan clutched the envelope tightly. Thanks. As he rejoined his family by the SUV, the weight of the evidence, both tangible and emotional, pressed heavily on him. Despite what everyone else seemed to accept, Ryan couldn't believe his mom had just walked away. There had to be more to it, and maybe the answers were tucked inside the envelope he held close. They climbed back into the SUV, their earlier eagerness now replaced by a heavy hush. Jake took the driver's seat this time, wordlessly snatching the keys from Ryan. "I'll drive," he said simply, firing up the engine as everyone settled in. Ryan slid into the back row, claiming the space to pore over the envelope's contents. As the SUV pulled away from Miller's Lake, he flicked on his phone's flashlight and started rifling through the papers. The first pages were routine police documents, details of the recovery effort, lists of items found in the car, and photos of the vehicle from different angles, showing its decayed state after 14 years underwater. Ryan scanned each sheet closely, hunting for anything to challenge the idea that his mom had abandoned them, but found little to bolster his faith in her loyalty. Jake drove more recklessly than Ryan had earlier, taking corners sharply and gunning it on straight stretches. The jolting made it tough for Ryan to focus on the papers. "Can you ease up a bit?" Ryan called forward, but Jake either didn't hear or ignored him. After a few more minutes of struggling to read through the lurching ride, Ryan grudgingly tucked the papers back into the envelope, deciding to wait until they got home, or better yet, until he was alone in his apartment, where he could dig into them without his siblings' skeptical stares. The drive back to their dad's house passed in uneasy silence, punctuated only by the engine's hum and John's occasional sighs from the front seat. When they rolled into the driveway, the porch light still casting a warm glow, Lucas broke the tension. "Are we still watching that movie?" he asked hesitantly, glancing at his family. "We don't have to let the night end like this, right?" The question lingered for a moment before Olivia nodded slowly. "I think that'd be nice. We've got dessert ready, and it'd be a shame to waste the evening." "Dad." Emma looked to John for agreement. He managed a faint smile. "Yeah, I think we could all use a break." They helped John back into his wheelchair and headed inside. Jake and Olivia made a beeline for the living room, flipping on the TV and browsing options, while Emma darted to the kitchen to grab the apple pie she'd baked. Lucas wavered between groups before joining his older siblings by the screen. Ryan lingered by the door, the envelope still gripped in his hands. "I'm not sticking around," he declared. The others turned to him. "What's that mean?" John asked. "I'm heading home," Ryan said. "I need to go through these files properly. There could be something big in here." "Ryan," Jake cut in, his voice edged with frustration. "Give it up. After 14 years, we finally have some answers. It's not what we hoped for, but at least it's something." "We don't have answers," Ryan insisted. "All we've got is a car in a lake and a pile of guesses." "Please stay," Emma said softly. "Just for the movie. We can deal with this tomorrow when we've all had time to think." Ryan looked at his youngest sister, her face earnest and pleading, then at his dad, slouched slightly in his chair, looking frilier and more exhausted than he had hours ago. For a second, he considered giving in, sitting through a film he wouldn't focus on, acting like everything was okay while his mind churned. "I'm sorry," he said at last. "I've got to do this." Without waiting for more protests, he stepped outside and headed to his car. Through the front window, he saw his family settling around the TV, slipping into their usual spots. John's wheelchair parked by the couch's end, Emma perched on the armrest beside him. The others sprawled across the furniture. Ryan sat in his car for a moment, keys in the ignition but the engine off. "Where are you, Mom?" he whispered into the empty cabin. What happened to you? Did you really just leave us? He swiped at his eyes, frustrated by the tears welling up. I was the oldest, he muttered. After Dad's stroke, I had to step up. Skipped college to work, helped raise the kids, did everything to keep us together. And now they resent me for not believing you walked away. Steadying himself with a deep breath, Ryan started the engine and turned on the dome light. He opened the envelope again, spreading the documents across the passenger seat. This time, he noticed a smaller packet inside, labeled miscellaneous. Curious, he opened it to find photocopies of personal items and papers recovered from the car. Among them was a lease agreement, faded from water damage but still partly readable. Ryan stared at it, puzzled. Dated about 3 months after his mom's disappearance, the lease didn't bear Laura Wilson's name but an unfamiliar one, Sarah Bennett. What grabbed him, though, was the signature at the bottom. Though blurry in the copy, he instantly recognized his mom's unique handwriting, the same flowing L she used on his school forms, the same bold W from her grocery lists. Sarah Bennett, he murmured, eyes locked on the signature. Mom used an alias. His pulse quickened as he examined the document closer. It listed an address. Ryan punched it into his phone's map app, and the satellite view showed a property in an industrial area far from their home, nowhere near residential zones. It wasn't a house or apartment but looked like a warehouse or storage unit, surrounded by similar gritty buildings. This doesn't add up, he said under his breath. Why would Mom lease a warehouse under a fake name? Then he spotted another detail on the lease, the name Richard Holt. It rang a faint bell, but Ryan couldn't place it. He typed it into a search engine, and the results sent a chill through him. News articles popped up, some years old. Local tycoon Richard Holt probed in money laundering case. Holt cleared of fraud due to insufficient evidence. Holt's properties tied to shady loan schemes. Ryan skimmed several stories, building a portrait of a man who danced on the edge of the law, entangled in predatory lending and murky deals that police could never fully pin down. He glanced back at the house, where his family's silhouettes flickered against the TV's glow. For a moment, he thought about marching back in, showing them his find, but he knew they'd shut him down. They'd settled on their version of their mom's fate, and no lease or sketchy landlord would sway them. I'm doing this alone, Ryan resolved, shifting into reverse and pulling out of the driveway. Instead of heading to his apartment, he steered toward the address on the lease, determined to uncover what tied his mom to Richard Holt and why she'd rented a warehouse under a false name. The GPS led him through streets that grew rougher as he neared the industrial zone. Streetlights dwindled, and the buildings turned grim, shuttered factories with smashed windows, storage lots ringed by chain-link fences crowned with barbed wire, and the occasional 24-hour truck stop spilling harsh neon light across deserted parking lots. After 20 minutes behind the wheel, the GPS chimed that Ryan had arrived at his destination. He eased off the gas, squinting through the windshield at a rundown single-story structure set back from the street. A crooked, faded sign above the door read Prime Furniture Restoration. Ryan pulled into the gravel lot, parking a safe distance from the building. The place looked like it was still in business, but just barely. A faint glow spilled from inside, and an aging pickup truck sat near a side door. His headlights swept across the front, revealing windows blocked from within, hiding whatever was going on inside. He killed the engine but stayed put, mulling over his next step. He hadn't thought this far ahead, hadn't planned what he'd do once he got here. It was pushing 10 p.m. and he figured no one would be working this late. Still, someone was clearly inside. As he weighed whether to approach or come back in daylight, a figure stepped out from a side door, an older man clutching a steaming cup in a plastic holder. The man clocked Ryan's car right away and started walking toward it with a steady, purposeful stride. Ryan's gut screamed to peel out, but a nagging feeling told him this might be his only shot to uncover something about this place and its link to his mom. He cracked his window as the man got closer. The security guard, that's what he seemed to be, was older than Ryan first thought, maybe early 60s, but carried himself with the strength and assurance of a younger man. Despite the chilly night, he wore just a thin jacket over a plain uniform shirt, no logo in sight. His face was lined but sharp, his eyes piercing as they sized up Ryan. "Hey there," the man said, his tone surprisingly warm. "You lost?" Not many people wind up out here this late unless they took a wrong turn. Ryan paused, quickly weighing his options. Spilling the truth felt too dangerous. He couldn't just say he was digging into his mom's long-ago disappearance tied to the spot. Instead, he went with a believable cover story. "You might be right, I probably missed a turn," Ryan said, forcing a casual tone. "But as I was passing by, this place caught my eye. I've got a small business and I'm scouting for warehouse space around here. I know it's late, but I saw the light and thought I'd take a look." The guard sipped his coffee, eyeing Ryan over the cup's rim. "This place isn't up for grabs, if that's what you're thinking." "Who's the owner?" Ryan asked, keeping his curiosity light. "Jack Holt," the guard answered. Ryan's pulse jumped at the familiar last name. "Jack Holt? Don't think I know him." The guard raised an eyebrow. "Son of Richard Holt. Never heard of Richard Holt?" Ryan shook his head, playing dumb. "Should I have?" "Richard owned most of the industrial land around here," the guard said. "Passed a few years back. His son Jack took over the family business." "Got it," Ryan said, his mind spinning. "Any way to get in touch with Jack?" "Not to buy, maybe just to talk about leasing some space." The guard let out a low chuckle. "Jack's a private guy. Doesn't deal with folks directly, especially not random visitors showing up after dark." "Anyone else I could reach out to then?" "Like a manager, maybe tomorrow." Ryan pressed. The guard thought it over for a second. "All right, here's the deal, a swing by tomorrow during regular hours. Ask for Greg. He handles Jack's business at this place." "Greg," Ryan repeated, locking the name in his memory. "He'll be here tomorrow for sure?" "I report to him and I've got his contact," the guard said. "I can give him a heads up tonight that someone's interested." "That'd be awesome," Ryan said carefully, avoiding sharing his own number. "I'll drop by tomorrow." The guard nodded, taking another sip of his coffee. "Greg prefers face-to-face meetings. Heads up, he's not big on people bringing partners or extras to these first talks. Likes to get a read on folks one-on-one." "Got it," Ryan said. "I'll show up solo." He was about to roll up his window when a thought hit him. If he left now, he'd only confirmed the Holt family still owned the property, nothing solid. Taking a risky leap, he called after the guard, who was already walking away. "One last thing," Ryan said. "Ever heard of a woman named Sarah Bennett around here?" The reaction was instant and chilling. The guard's whole vibe shifted, his shoulders tensed, his face locked into a cold, blank stare. The friendly security guy was gone, replaced by someone far more threatening. "You need to get out of here," he said, his voice flat, all warmth drained. Ryan, realizing he'd pushed too far but not ready to back off completely, tried again. "I just need to know if." The guard closed the gap to the car in 2 quick strides, his weathered hands gripping the edge of Ryan's half-open window as he leaned in close, his face inches away. "Chasing ghosts, huh?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You're in the right spot." She didn't want anyone finding her. A shiver shot down Ryan's spine. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Who didn't want to be found?" The guard straightened, tapping his knuckles hard against the door frame. "If you're set on digging into that, talk to Greg tomorrow, but I wouldn't recommend it." He wrapped the frame again. "Time to go." Ryan hesitated for a split second before shifting into reverse. He backed up slowly, watching the guard stand motionless, his icy stare following Ryan until he turned the car and drove off. His mind raced as he headed back toward town. The guard clearly knew Sarah Bennett, his mom's alias, and his reaction proved she was tied to this place. But what was that talk about ghosts? And why say she didn't want to be found if not to imply she'd left on purpose? It didn't add up. Yet, for the first time in 14 years, Ryan felt he was closing in on something tangible, something that might finally explain what happened to his mom. The dashboard clock glowed 11:35 p.m. As Ryan drove back, his thoughts churned with questions and theories. The guard's words seemed to back what his siblings believed, that their mom chose to vanish. But the way the guard flipped from friendly to menacing hinted at a deeper story, more than just a woman walking away from her life. Ryan knew he should tell his family what he'd uncovered, but after their reactions at dinner and the lake, he doubted they'd hear him out. They'd each found their own way to cope with their mom's absence. Jake had turned practical, shouldering responsibility. Olivia had built walls against more hurt. Emma poured her heart into caring for their dad. And Lucas, just a baby when Laura disappeared, barely knew her at all. None of them wanted to rip open old scars except Ryan, who'd never bought the idea that she abandoned them. But there was someone else who might care about his discovery. Ryan pulled onto the shoulder and dug Detective Carter's card from his wallet. He hesitated before calling, knowing the detective might not take kindly to him snooping alone, but decided the info was too critical to hold back. The detective picked up on the fourth ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Carter speaking." "Detective, it's Ryan Wilson. Sorry for calling so late." There was a rustle, like the detective was sitting up. "Ryan, everything okay?" "I found something in those evidence copies you gave me," Ryan said, easing into the truth. There was a lease or contract in the miscellaneous packet. It led to a warehouse rented under Sarah Bennett's name. But the signature, it's my mom's handwriting. "I noticed that too," Detective Carter said, sounding more alert. "It stood out to me. Why didn't you bring it up before?" Ryan asked, a hint of frustration creeping in. "It lined up with what we already figured," the detective said calmly. "Folks who vanish on purpose often create new identities, renting places under aliases to start fresh. But this isn't a house or apartment," Ryan pushed. "It's a warehouse in an industrial area, and the landlord's Richard Holt. Did you check him out?" There was a brief silence. "Yeah, I did," Carter said. Richard Holt was a big name in certain circles. His businesses played fast and loose with the law, predatory loans, shady debt collection. He was investigated plenty but never convicted. So why would my mom lease a place from a guy like that? "I think it's all connected." Detective Carter spoke carefully. "From what we've pieced together, I think your mom needed to disappear fast and completely. Richard Holt's setup included helping people do that for a steep price. That warehouse was probably a stopover, a place for new identities before moving on." "You're saying she went there to change who she was?" Ryan asked, disbelief heavy in his voice. "To start over?" "The timing fits," the detective replied. "The lease is dated 3 months after she went missing. That's enough time to set things up, maybe with someone else." "Someone else?" Ryan snapped. "There's no proof she was with anybody." "Those sunglasses in the car," Carter reminded him. Men's sunglasses with Greg etched into one arm. Ryan's grip on the phone faltered. "Greg," he echoed, his heart racing. "You're sure it said Greg?" "Dead certain," the detective confirmed. "Why is that name ringing a bell?" Ryan's thoughts were in overdrive. The guard had mentioned Greg, said he managed Jack Holt's business, told Ryan to come back tomorrow to meet him. Could this be the same Greg whose sunglasses were in his mom's car? "Ryan," Detective Carter prompted. "You still there?" "Yeah, I'm here," Ryan said, snapping back. I did something I probably shouldn't have. After finding the lease, I drove to that address." "You did what?" Carter's voice sharpened. "Ryan, that was reckless. If there's any link between your mom's disappearance and Richard Holt's operations." I know, Ryan cut in. "But I learned something. There was a guard there, and when I mentioned Sarah Bennett, he reacted. He knew her, detective. And he brought up someone named Greg who works there, maybe the same Greg from the sunglasses. A long pause hung on the line. When Carter spoke again, his tone was firm but controlled. Ryan, listen close. These people are dangerous. If they're tied to your mom's case, they won't think twice about protecting their interests. You're not to go near that warehouse again. Clear. Button. No buts. Carter cut him off. This is an active investigation now. We'll handle it right with warrants, backup, the works. You sticking your nose in could mess it all up, not to mention put you in real danger. Ryan's grip tightened on the phone. So I'm just supposed to sit back and do nothing? That's exactly right, Carter said. I'm glad you told me this, but now you need to step aside and let us do our job. The guard said to come back tomorrow to meet Greg, Ryan said. This could be our only shot to figure out what happened to my mom. No way, Carter said sternly. You're not going back there, period. We'll send an undercover officer, set up surveillance. There's a right way to do this. Ryan knew Carter was right, but the idea of waiting, potentially losing their one lead after 14 years, was agony. Still, he saw the risk to himself and the investigation. All right, he relented. I won't go back. Thank you, Carter said, relief clear in his voice. I'm making calls now to get things rolling. We'll keep you in the loop on any updates, I promise. One last thing, Ryan added before Carter could hang up. My dad and siblings could be in danger too. If these guys figure out we're poking around, I'll have patrol cars swing by your place and your dad's house regularly, Carter assured him. Go get some rest, Ryan, and steer clear of that warehouse. After the call ended, Ryan sat in his parked car for a few minutes, wrestling with his choices. Carter's warnings made sense and the danger was real. But 14 years of unanswered questions, of wondering what happened to his mom, of being the only one who believed she didn't leave willingly, it all clashed with the part of him screaming to be cautious. In the end, he drove to his apartment lot, knowing sleep wouldn't come easy, but realizing he needed to plan his next move carefully. Whatever he chose, one thing was clear. He was closer to the truth about his mom's disappearance than ever before. Morning broke with a sharpness that had escaped Ryan through his sleepless night. After tossing and turning, he'd finally drifted into uneasy sleep around 4 a.m., only to be jolted awake by his phone at 7:30. Detective Carter's number flashed on the screen. I'm coming to get you, Carter said without preamble when Ryan picked up. We're heading to that warehouse, but it's on my terms. Be ready in 15. Right on time, Detective Carter pulled up outside Ryan's apartment in an unmarked car, dressed down in jeans, a worn button-down, and a beat-up leather jacket that made him look more like a tradesman than a cop. Ryan slid into the passenger seat, immediately noticing they weren't alone. In the back was another man in casual clothes, introduced by Carter as Officer Daniels, tactical support. I've been up all night setting this up, Carter said as he pulled away. Based on what you told me about Richard Holt and his son Jack, we're treating this as a high-risk situation. I've got undercover officers posted around the warehouse and a tactical team waiting a few blocks out. Wouldn't it make sense to use my car? Ryan suggested. The guard saw it last night, so it might not raise any red flags. Detective Carter paused briefly before giving a nod. Good call. Let's swap vehicles at the next lot. 10 minutes later, they'd switched to Ryan's car, with him at the wheel and Detective Carter riding shotgun. Officer Daniels stayed behind in the unmarked police cruiser, now part of the surveillance setup. Listen up, you don't leave this car unless I give you the green light, Carter warned as they neared the industrial district where the warehouse Saturday. You're only here because you've already made contact, and your presence won't seem out of place. But this is a police op, not some personal quest. Ryan nodded, his throat tight with nerves and anticipation. As they turned onto the warehouse's street, He spotted the same pickup truck from the night before parked outside. But something felt off. The place was eerily still, too quiet. "Something's wrong," Carter muttered, his seasoned gaze sweeping the property. No activity, just that lone truck. Ryan pulled into the gravel lot, parking roughly where he had the previous night. They sat for a moment, eyeing the warehouse. The windows were still covered, but unlike before, no light leaked out from inside. "Stay put," Carter said, his hand slipping to the hidden gun under his jacket. "I'm gonna scope it out. If I signal you to bolt, you drive straight to Officer Daniels at the meetup point." Ryan watched as the detective moved toward the building with cautious precision, his movements honed by years of handling risky situations. Carter checked the pickup first, peering through its windows, then headed to the side door where Ryan had seen the guard emerge the night before. Finding the door unlocked, Carter slipped inside. 5 minutes ticked by, then 10. Ryan's anxiety spiked with each passing second, his fingers tapping restlessly on the steering wheel. At last, Carter reappeared at the entrance, motioning for Ryan to come over. Against his better instincts, but driven by a burning need for answers, Ryan stepped out and hurried across the gravel. "It's deserted," Carter said as Ryan reached him. "Completely cleaned out. They must have scrambled to clear the place after you showed up last night." Ryan followed the detective into the warehouse, the stale scent of dust and neglect hitting him hard. The vast interior was nearly empty, with obvious signs of a rushed exit. Clean patches on the grimy floor where equipment once stood, bare wall brackets where shelves had been, and cut wires dangling from the ceiling. "They were running something serious here," Carter noted, gesturing toward a corner where dividers had formed separate rooms. "Check this out, makeshift bedrooms, work desks. This was way beyond just storage." Ryan wandered slowly through the space, trying to picture his mom in this grim place, grappling with what her connection to it could be. Was she held here against her will? Did she come willingly, desperate to vanish? Or was there another answer entirely? "Over here," Carter called from across the room, crouched beside a toppled desk, inspecting something on the floor. Ryan joined him, seeing the detective holding a photo that must have slid under the desk during the frantic evacuation. It showed a cargo ship moored at what looked like an industrial dock, its name, Pacific Dawn Dash, clearly painted on the hull. "Flip it over," Carter said, passing the photo to Ryan. On the back, handwritten notes listed the ship's name, a departure date set for the following week, and a partial roster of names, including Sarah B. and Greg M. "They're planning to move people on this ship," Carter said, pulling out his phone. "And based on this list, your mom could be one of them." He quickly radioed his team, ordering a harbor search and relaying the ship's name. "This is top priority," he stressed. "We need to track down the Pacific Dawn and stop it from leaving." Turning to Ryan, he added, "We've got to move fast. If Greg and his crew bailed last night, they might have sped up their plans. That ship could be gearing up to sail early." As they rushed back to the car, Carter made another call, this time asking for officers to check on John and the rest of the family. "After your visit last night, these people know someone's sniffing around. We need to keep your family safe." Ryan felt a jolt of fear for his dad and siblings. "I didn't even think about that," he admitted. "I was so focused on finding Mom." "Call them," Carter directed as they climbed into Ryan's car. "Reach out to each one personally, tell them what's going on, and make sure they stay put. Officers are on their way to secure their locations." As they sped toward the harbor, Ryan followed orders, dialing his dad first, then each sibling, repeating the warning and instructions. John was stunned and angry. Jake and Olivia were doubtful, Lucas bewildered, but they all agreed to comply with the detective's guidance. "They're all notified," Ryan told Carter as the harbor came into view. "But I'm not sure they really think there's any risk." Better to play it safe, Carter said grimly. If Greg and the Holt operation are as dangerous as I suspect, they won't hesitate to use your family as leverage if they feel trapped. The harbor loomed ahead, a massive industrial port with piers jutting into the gray bay waters. Cargo ships of all sizes lined the docks, loading or unloading, while smaller boats weaved through the channels. At the main security gate, Carter flashed his badge, explaining they were part of an active police operation. The guard waved them through, pointing them toward the harbormaster's office. Inside, the place was a hive of activity. Several officers were already there, working with harbor officials to pinpoint the Pacific Dawn dash. What's the situation? Carter asked, approaching a uniformed officer who seemed to be in charge. The Pacific Dawn slipped out last night, the officer said, his face grim. Almost 12 hours ahead of its scheduled departure. Port Authority approved the early exit citing weather issues, but there's no sign of any storms in the area. They knew, Ryan said, the realization hitting like a punch. They figured out we were onto them the second I asked about my mom last night. Carter placed a firm hand on Ryan's shoulder. We're not done yet. Harbor patrols already chasing and the Coast Guard's on alert. That ship can't have gone too far in 12 hours. What about the docks? Ryan asked, nodding toward the wharves. Could some of Greg's people still be hanging around? We're ahead of you, the officer replied. We've rounded up a few dock workers tied to the Pacific Dawn's early departure. They're being questioned as we speak. Carter nodded approvingly. Solid work. Let's get to the station. I want to be there for those interrogations. The drive to the police station was charged with tension, Carter constantly on his phone, orchestrating the growing investigation. Every few minutes, he got updates on the Pacific Dawn, search or reports on the safety measures for the Wilson family. They've spotted the ship, he said after one call. Coast Guard planes picked it up about 100 miles offshore, heading south. They're sending boats to cut it off. Ryan's grip on the wheel tightened, his mind racing with possibilities. Could his mom really be on that ship? After 14 years, was he finally on the verge of finding her? When they reached the station, it was buzzing with activity. Officers moved with purpose, phones rang nonstop, and a sense of urgency filled the air. To Ryan's surprise, his whole family was there, gathered in a waiting area. John in his wheelchair, looking dazed and weary, Emma standing protectively behind him, Jake and Olivia side by side, their faces a mix of worry and doubt. And Lucas fidgeting restlessly in his seat. Why are you all here? Ryan asked, approaching them. I thought you were staying home. The cops brought us in for safety, Jake explained, standing to meet his brother. They said it's easier to protect us if we're all in one place. Protect us from what, exactly? Olivia demanded, arms crossed tightly. Ryan, what did you do? Before Ryan could answer, Carter stepped forward. Your brother might have uncovered the truth about your mom's disappearance, he said, his voice calm but firm, and that truth could put you all in danger. He gave a quick rundown of their findings, the warehouse, the cargo ship photo, the names on the list, and the chance that Laura was forced to work for Greg and the Holt operation. So you're saying Mom didn't leave us on purpose? Emma asked, her voice soft and hopeful. That she was taken? From what we've gathered, it looks like your mom got tangled up with a criminal network run by Richard Holt and his son Jack, Carter explained. We think she was coerced into working for them, likely over a debt or some kind of pressure. That doesn't add up, Jay countered. Mom didn't have debts. Dad took care of the money back then. John cleared his throat, his voice barely audible. That's not quite true. Everyone turned to him, stunned. After my stroke, the medical bills were crushing, John went on, his voice heavy with the weight of his admission. Our insurance didn't cover it all. Laura was desperate. She tried for bank loans, but we were already tapped out. I was in the hospital, then rehab. I didn't know how she was keeping us afloat. Dad, Ryan said, dropping to one knee beside his father's wheelchair. Are you saying Mom might have borrowed from someone like Richard Holt? John nodded slowly, tears brimming in his eyes. She mentioned once, just once, that she'd found a way to cover the bills. Told me not to worry, that she had it handled. I was so caught up in recovery in the pain I didn't press her. I should have asked more. Carter pulled up a chair facing John. Mr. Wilson, this is critical. Did your wife ever mention names? Richard Holt, Greg? Anyone tied to the loans? John shook his head. No names, but about a week before she vanished, she said something strange. Said everything she did was for us. I thought she was just stressed, being dramatic under all the pressure. I never thought. His voice cracked and Emma rested a comforting hand on his shoulder. The guys we nabbed at the harbor are being grilled now, Carter said to the family. We're hoping they'll shed light on the Pacific Dawn and whether your mom's on board. I want to talk to them, Ryan said firmly. Carter hesitated. That's not how we do things, Ryan. Please, Ryan pressed. I'm the one who talked to the guard at the warehouse. I might recognize someone, or they might know me. After a moment's thought, Carter nodded. Fine, but you're just watching. I handled the talking. He led Ryan down a hallway to a room where they could observe interrogations through a one-way mirror. In the next room, a middle-aged man in dockworker gear sat cuffed to a table facing two officers' questions. That's not the guard I saw, Ryan said, studying the man. They watched for a few minutes as the dockworker stonewalled, giving only his name and harbor job details. Carter jotted notes, occasionally muttering about the man's posture or answers. Let's check the next one, he said, seeing no progress with the suspect. In the second room, an older man was being questioned and Ryan tensed instantly. That's him, he said urgently. The guard from the warehouse. Carter peered through the glass. You're certain? Absolutely, Ryan confirmed. He's the one who mentioned Greg. Carter nodded, thoughtful. Let's hear what he's saying. Unlike the dockworker, the guard seemed almost at ease, answering with a cool detachment that verged on smugness. He admitted working security for Jack Holt but claimed no knowledge of the Pacific Dawn's cargo or route. He's full of it, Ryan muttered. He knew about my mom. Practically admitted she was there. Carter observed the questioning a bit longer before deciding. I'm going in. Stay here and watch. Ryan watched as Carter entered the room, introduced himself to the other officers, and sat across from the guard. His approach was smoother, more conversational than confrontational. We've had eyes on that warehouse for a while, Carter said casually, though Ryan knew it was a bluff. We've ID'd most of the people held there, including Laura Wilson. The guard's face stayed neutral, but his shoulders tightened slightly. We know she was forced to work for Holt, likely over a loan she couldn't pay back, Carter continued. What we don't know is if she's still alive and if she's on that ship. No idea what you're talking about, the guard said evenly. That's funny, Carter said, leaning in a bit. Because you seem to know exactly who she was when her son brought up her name last night. A quick flash of recognition crossed the guard's face, swiftly hidden. Her son's here, by the way, Carter added. He picked you out right away, and let me tell you, he's dead set on finding his mom after 14 years thinking she ditched him and his family. The guard stayed quiet, his eyes flicking briefly to the mirror. Here's the deal, Carter said, his tone hardening. We're gonna catch that ship. The Coast Guard's already on its tail, and when we do, everyone on board will start talking to save their own skin. Greg, Jack Holt, they'll toss you under the bus faster than you can blink to cut their time. The guard's cool facade started to crack. He shifted, eyes dropping to the table. You're facing heavy charges, Carter pressed. Kidnapping, unlawful detention, maybe human trafficking. But if you help us now, tell us where that ship's headed, and if Laura Wilson's on it, I can put in a good word with the DA. The guard was silent for a long moment, then let out a heavy sigh, like a man weighing a tough choice. I'm old, he said at last. I'm sick. Jail's just another place to kick the bucket. Then why not do one decent thing before you're gone? Carter suggested. Help a family reunite with their mom. The guard thought it over, then leaned forward, speaking softly. I don't know where the ship's going, honest. That info's locked down tight. But I can give you something that might help. What's that? There's an app, a secure chat system we use. My login might still work. It's got a GPS tracker for the ship, plus onboard camera feeds. That's how Greg keeps tabs on everything. Carter's eyes lit up. And you're willing to hand that over? The guard nodded slowly. Like I said, I'm dying anyway. Might as well do one good deed. Carter slid a notepad across the table. Write it all down, the login, everything we need to get in. As the guard scribbled, Ryan felt a rush of hope unlike anything in 14 years. For the first time, he had solid proof his mom hadn't abandoned them and might still be out there. Carter emerged from the room with a grim satisfaction, clutching the guard's login details. Let's get this to the tech crew now, he said to Ryan, hurrying down the hall. If this app's what he claims, we could pinpoint the ship and maybe even see who's on it. They headed to a room where officers worked at computer stations with intense focus. Carter handed the login info to a tech specialist, explaining its importance. We need to tap into this app without tipping off anyone watching the system, he instructed. Can you pull that off? The specialist reviewed the details, then nodded confidently. I can set up a mirrored session that won't trip any alarms. Give me a few minutes. Ryan and Carter returned to the waiting area where the Wilson family waited. As they approached, Ryan saw the tension etched on their faces, hope clashing with doubt, fear of another letdown after years of accepting the worst. Find anything? Jake asked, standing as they walked in. Maybe, Carter said cautiously. The guard gave us access to an app that could help us track the ship and confirm who's on board. Tech's working on it now. And you really think Mom's alive? Lucas asked, his young face torn between confusion and desperate hope. That she didn't just leave us? It's starting to look that way, Ryan said gently. Dad just told us about the medical bills, how Mom was scrambling to cover them. It's clicking now. She might have borrowed from Holt, couldn't pay it back, and they forced her to work for them. But 14 years? Olivia protested, her usual skepticism softened by uncertainty. Without a single word? These groups thrive on cutting people off, Carter explained. They isolate families, use threats to keep control. If Laura thought reaching out would put you at risk, she might have stayed silent to protect you. John reached for Ryan's hand, tears spilling down his cheeks. I should have seen it, he whispered. All this time, I thought she left because I was broken, because I couldn't provide anymore. We didn't know, Dad, Ryan said, gripping his father's hand tightly. But we're gonna find her now. We're bringing her home. Carter's phone buzzed, cutting through the heavy moment. He answered quickly, listening closely before saying, we're on our way. To the family, he said, Tex cracked the app. They need us in the computer lab right now. They moved together down the hall, Jake pushing John's wheelchair while Emma and Olivia flanked their dad, protective and steady. Lucas stayed near Ryan, occasionally glancing at his big brother with fresh admiration. The computer lab was a sprawling space packed with monitors, servers, and tech gear. The specialist handling the app waved them to a central workstation where a large screen showed a map with a blinking dot inching across a blue expanse. That's the Pacific Dawn Dash, the specialist said, pointing to the dot. The GPS tracker puts it about 120 miles offshore, heading south-southeast. We've already sent these coordinates to the Coast Guard. Can you pull up the security cams? Carter asked. The specialist nodded, fingers flying over the keyboard. The app gives limited access to feeds, mostly work areas, not private cabins. I'm cycling through them now. The screen split into several smaller views, each showing different parts of the ship, cargo holds, hallways, engine rooms. A few displayed makeshift workspaces where people, mostly women, sat at desks or computers. Hold up, Ryan said suddenly, pointing at one feed. Can you blow that one up? The specialist enlarged the feed, filling the screen with a room where several women worked at computers, their faces partially turned from the camera. Zoom in on the woman in the back, Ryan urged, his heart pounding. As the image sharpened, a collective gasp rose from the Wilson family. Though aged 14 years, with gray-streaked hair and a thinner face, the woman at the computer was unmistakably Laura. Mom, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. John reached a shaking hand toward the screen as if he could bridge the distance to his wife. Laura, he choked out, voice breaking. Carter was on his phone instantly, relaying the news to the Coast Guard. We've got visual confirmation of a kidnapping victim on board. Repeat, confirmation of Laura Wilson, missing for 14 years. Proceed with extreme caution, multiple potential victims present. To the Wilsons, he said, the Coast Guard's closing in. They'll secure the ship and get everyone off safely. We need to keep this quiet to avoid tipping off anyone on board monitoring comms. What now? Jake asked, his earlier doubts erased by the undeniable proof his mom was alive. We wait, Carter said simply. And we get ready for your mom's return. John sat silently in his wheelchair, tears occasionally trailing down his face as he gazed at his wife's image. Emma and Olivia clung to each other, sometimes murmuring, sometimes just holding hands in quiet support. Jake paced, his practical side restless for action. Lucas shifted between sitting by his dad and standing near Ryan, who stayed glued to the main monitor, barely looking away. I knew it, Ryan said softly to Carter during a moment alone. Deep down, I always knew she wouldn't have left us by choice. You never stopped believing in her, Carter noted. That kind of trust is rare. She's the one who never gave up on us, Ryan corrected. Whatever they put her through, she made it. 14 years, and she's still fighting. In that quiet moment, surrounded by proof of his mom's survival, Ryan grasped something deep about family ties. Faith wasn't just blind belief, it was clinging to truth when everything screamed otherwise. For 14 years, their family had splintered under the pain of abandonment, each building their own shield against the hurt. But beneath it all, their bond endured, ready to be rebuilt. Standing on the edge of reunion, Ryan realized courage wasn't about facing outside threats but daring to hope, the raw, terrifying act of believing broken pieces could be whole again. Their mom had survived captivity to protect them. Now they'd face the unknown to bring her home. Whatever lay ahead on that cargo ship, they'd tackle it together, not as a fractured family, but as what they'd always been, beneath the wounds and silence, a web of lives tied by a love so strong that no time or distance could break it.